either Alexa or Christoph, if you wanna kick us off today.
Alexa, how do we figure it out?
I don't know. I think, Christoph and I have been working on a few things for you guys. I think we have met before and have kind of talked through some of this stuff. And then we kind of worked on our own. Hello, Patricia. We worked on our own, so we each have a few different aspects to discuss, I think. And we have a couple of separate files. I think I'm going to share those with you guys. Let's see. And I know Christoph has gone in detail as far as saying what some of the issues are. So I don't know, Christoph, do you want to start with some of those things, or would you like?
Yeah, sure. Sounds good. As Alexa said, we've been kind of working a little bit separately, but had a few checkpoints. So I think we kind of have different ideas that we can bring in. Maybe we just lay it out all on the table, and then get some feedback and have some conversations, and then from there kind of figure out what we want to do next. So you can already see it in my background here. You want to start? Let's start with the remote configuration, and I'll just talk a little bit about here. Can you see that video well? Can you kind of tell the detail on quality is good?
Yeah,
more or less.
it's reasonably good. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll also share the file real quick in.
It's the first file that I've shared, so already there, Christoph.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, so in terms of my process, what I typically do is, first I try to figure out what the actual problem is here. Then I try it out. So I have an Umbrella running on a Raspberry Pi and Specter desktops and some hardware wallets. So I just try it out, get a feel for it. Another thing I do is I take a lot of screenshots, and then I just annotated everything, things that worked well for me. Also kind of capturing how I reacted to things when I was using it. Then, I recreate the different screens in Figma. So which allows me, I take the screenshots, I recreate it in Figma, which, at that point, then I understand what's on there. Like I have the details kind of internalized. And then I start moving things around and experimenting with different approaches. And what I did here too, generally is, I think there are some limitations of what we want to do here. I think we early as a group kind of talked about that the idea right now is not to visually redesign this whole thing, right? Just kind of work with what's there. So one of my first steps was really just to look at the text that's there, see how we can improve the copy. One of my next steps after that was address some of the bigger issues per screen. If we don't just touch copy, we don't go all the way to redesigning, like changing how the major pages are laid out or introduce new elements, but just make smaller tweaks, and then move on to bigger overhauls. And one of the biggest things, actually, let's start from the top here. And this is probably only the Spectre team, and Alexa and I will probably understand this here, but I'll try to go through it real quick. To explain the problem to everyone else. One of the issues is that you can use Spectre on your laptop, on your desktop, you plug your hardware wallet in that same machine, and then they talk to each other. That's default. You can also use it in a different way, and that's what I said earlier. If I have like a Raspberry Pi, if I have a server, and Spectre runs on there, and I can also access that Spectre from my main computer. And I want to plug my hardware wallet into my main computer, but the hardware wallet needs to talk to the Spectre that runs on my server. So there's some complexity involved in setting that up. And it very quickly gets super confusing because, and this is not going to make sense probably, is when you run Spectre on your desktop and you set it to use your server Spectre, then you start the desktop application, but what you see is the interface that's loaded basically from your server. And it goes one level deeper here. And let me know if I understood this correctly. So when I load my desktop app, my Specter app, but I tell it to access, I want to use Specter from a server. It pulls in the interface from the server. And then I need to use the hardware bridge for it to be able to talk to my hardware wallets that or devices that I've plugged in. And to configure that hardware bridge, it's embedded inside the Specter node interface that's being loaded from my server that's inside the desktop application. And that is the Specter inception. I mean, it's super. Did I understand that correctly?
Is it that complicated, guys?
Yes.
It took me a long time to figure this out.
First thing we need help with, yes.
I didn't imagine it's so complicated. I'm just here like, okay, Kim, is it true?
In my mind, it's not that complicated, only in reality.
Yeah, once you kind of figure it out, it kind of makes sense, but it takes a while. And so I think to clarify that, I came up with a handful of different approaches. So one of the simple things is that when you start Specter for the first time, it asks you like, hey, do you want to run this locally or do you have a server? And you can say, well, I have a server. But then when you actually start Specter, it says, welcome to Specter Desktop, even though I just told it, hey, I have a server. I want to run this from my server. And then it tells me, hey, welcome to Specter Desktop. So a simple change would be just looking at the copy to say, hey, welcome to your Specter server. And maybe it can already tell, like, it's running on Umbrel. And then it's like, hey, welcome to your Specter on your Umbrel. So it's more clear to me what's actually going on. So that's kind of what I meant by these smaller text changes. And then another thing is, and that can be pushed further. I didn't go through all the copy here. And so this hardware bridge configuration is primarily only important, I think, when you run it on your server. And if the application knows that it's running, you're accessing it remotely, then it can put that as an extra to-do item here in the onboarding flow. The default onboarding flow doesn't have that. It just says, hey, connect your node, set up your devices, create a wallet. But it could potentially be an additional task because otherwise, as a user, I don't know. I might not know. I might have no clue that this bridge needs extra configuration for me to be able to use my hardware wallets. So that was kind of one approach, one way I thought about clarifying some of these, what's going on to the user. Another problem that I found, Alexa, do you want me to go through everything, or do you also want to chime in? Do you want to have a conversation at this point?
Yeah, I could add a little bit of. I think I've gone through a similar process as Christoph. I'm first looking at kind of what is the problem, and then trying to simplify it to make it easier to understand, to try and hide those things that make it a bit more difficult, or that are a little bit more advanced and that you may not need to work with. Let's see. Yeah, for me, I think when I first installed Specter, there wasn't that pop-up window. I don't know if that was just like the original pop-up. So I do kind of agree with Christoph that there needs to be some kind of a guide as far as knowing where the remote section is. And I think we've also spoken about just rewording things, like instead of calling it a bridge, maybe calling it remote. And here, let me share my screen. If we're kind of covering this thing, let's see.
There are several layers to this, and the first layer is just understanding that what you're looking at that moment when you start things off, and realizing that there's a difference, like based on what mode you selected, local or remote, that the UI helps you out a little bit to figure out how to navigate it.
Let's see. Can you see my screen now?
Yep.
Okay. And for me, I think it was more of going into the preferences now, and I did the same thing that Christoph did. you have the screenshot, and then you kind of recreate it in Figma, and then you try to come up with a solution that could work. And I think that if we look at a lot of the things that have been done both on Christoph's sites and mine, is that we try to make either the wording a lot simpler or to hide some things that you don't need. So like I have the connect over Tor, but I know like in one of the original ones, you have this extra one so you can write it in. But I think if you don't have it selected, then you probably don't need that information. So there's little details like that. And you also have the daemon configuration there. And I think it, like if we look back on it, it looks really, really extensive, like really could confuse you as far as what you're supposed to do, I think. So if you need that, then you could expand on it. And I think you'll see quite a few of those suggestions from both of us. And for me, I think as far as the preferences go, connect remotely, and then it kind of guides you to paste and it's the same thing that Christoph says. It's a little hard to figure out how to separate both processes because one of them is in the preferences of the desktop app and the other one is in the remote version. And how to guide people there. I'm still kind of working on that because I know that if you change the preferences in one, you still need to tell people you have to go to settings and kind of set up the bridge. So you need to be able to guide there. And something for fun also, and I think we're both going to try things for fun, but like what would it look like if we tried a few other things? Like for me, I think a lot of the information that's out there may benefit from just a few little changes. So I know that we are not trying to redesign everything, but just thinking of adding like a little shadow on some of the URLs, it may let people know that you can kind of click in and fill it in a little bit easier or kind of have this extra shadow on it that feels more like a button that you can expand on. Little details like that could help sometime in the future to kind of guide people a little better. And that is as far as preferences go. And I'm sure you can. And then going back to this bridge thing, for me, it was more of a visual solution rather than just text. And if you can try and visualize what connecting to something remotely would be, I have kind of this few figures, and so you can kind of figure out that you have the hardware wallet and the desktop, and then you're trying to connect to another version. So for that, once you were to toggle that, then you'd know that you're trying to connect remotely. And kind of for fun, I also played a little bit with your Specter ghost, adding a little bit of a smile there, and a little bit of we're kind of in trouble here. So just all sorts of little details that need to be worked out.
One question regarding, because I really like this one here, and I didn't knew that yet the version from Christoph, but I don't think they are mutually exclusive, right? Isn't it that we can probably do both, I guess?
Yeah, I think we can put the pieces together from what works best, or what is. And that, I think that was the point of the exercise here, the idea that we could each come up with things and then try to come up with a better solution. And also, together with you, try to figure out if this is something that it actually works on the back end too. Yeah. Oh, and well, this is completely unrelated, but I was also thinking that one of the issues that I ran into when trying to navigate through it is that you have this menu bar up here, but if you click on settings, you're stuck in settings. Like there's no way to go back to the welcome screen, and it doesn't toggle off. So I wonder whether it would be the sort of thing that you click again and you're back on the welcome screen outside of settings, or whether it could be even something that you could click on the ghost and know that you're back on the welcome screen. And because people tend to need help all the time and that help is on the welcome screen only, maybe it would be good to add something here that would lead you to, hey, reach out to us on Telegram, or here's our GitHub thing like you have on the main screen. And also because of the Bitcoin settings here, I thought maybe it would be okay to have them in a different color so you can see the numbers kind of separately, not just an idea.
Very dangerous because very distracting during bull markets. You start staring at the price. Like
Yeah. Anyway, Christoph, would you like to add something to the settings section? I know that there's a lot of little details here.
Yeah. So in addition, I mean, what you did was visualize things in to help people understand a little bit better. The two things that I added, that I did maybe in addition to it. So one of the things I did was when I changed the device bridge URL, or when I update the whitelist settings, I see a message that says, okay, it was updated. But my problem was, from using it, was like, well, did it work? Can you just tell me, did it actually work now? So that was one of the things I tried to add in, where it tells me after I save it, okay, connection successful, no devices detected. Or there are different statuses. Okay, connection failed, bridge could not be reached, check your URL. Or connection failed, but the bridge didn't accept the connection, ensure Specter is whitelisted. Or connection successful, no devices detected. Or connection successful, one device detected. So right in that moment, it gives me instant feedback if it's actually working or not. So that was one of the things. And then that led me to the next thing where, so the default is it picks this URL here, right? And then the alternative, there's an additional URL. So usually it's just one of two that gets you going. So I thought, well, let's just give you two options. And why can't it just tell me and automatically check both options and just automatically use the right one? Why do I even have to configure it? So I checked what the browser's doing, and when it pings the API and what data gets sent back. And I don't know if it could be a privacy issue too, but I was then wondering why. Just show me those two default options that cover 99% of users, automatically ping them, see what data comes back, and show me a status accordingly. So I thought, well, if that's possible on this page, then why is that not possible also when I'm adding a device? So the process for adding a device is that you first pick your device type, usually. Looks like this. And then this little window pops up that says, and it tries to detect your device. But I was wondering, well, why don't you just tell me, if I just plug it in, it highlights the one that I typed that I've plugged in, and then it can just tell me right there. So that led me down this idea of not just clarifying the information that's there, but finding more ways that the program can, take things off my shoulder by itself a little bit. And then same thing. If by default, let's say I usually use my local device bridge or so, but there's one time where it says, hey, I didn't find a device locally, but I did find one remotely. Like, do you want to use that one? And I just press yes, and it just does it for me. So just thinking through the automation part. And of course, there's some technical stuff that has to be validated there. That'd be kind of interesting to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, actually, I have a couple of things to add to that too. Let's see. I'm sharing my screen again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. One of the issues here too is that if you go into the remote and you haven't switched the preferences first, Ben mentioned that it would be an issue because you'd have to redo the process. So I've tried to add this before changing these settings, try to make sure that you've already done that. And I do agree that sometimes you click on a lot of these things and there isn't necessarily a feedback that lets you know that it's okay. Now, as far as how it works in the back end, I'm not sure, because the original version you have, so you can add, like, you can click on this button and then it generates an additional one that's down here, and it sometimes automatically adds it here, but sometimes you have to add it on your own, which is kind of an issue. So for a positive, like, I wish that it would just automatically add it here and then you wouldn't need to do anything else. But since that may not be the case, and you kind of try to figure out how to guide people through the process. So I figure, like, if you were to clear everything out and just say, generate your local URL, and then you generate it and it says, okay, you have generated it. And it shows you the new one. And then you're like, okay, copy this one. Instead of having it feel a bit hidden. And I know it's kind of, I think it's one of those processes that you want to simplify somehow, and I don't know what your solution is, Christoph, but for me it was like, if you go next and then you have copy, and then after that you kind of see something like this, and then you paste it here and you save, and then you kind of know that something happened. But I think it's difficult because it's 3 different steps that you may not notice, and the problem here is like on here, right? So you click on this, you save, and then it gives you this address. But you kind of don't know that you could copy it there and paste it here. And like if it was just save, and it would automatically save it in every case and update it, and it would be easier, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I also spend a lot of time thinking about this, and that kind of goes back to the inception issue at the beginning. And maybe for everybody watching, just to clarify this a little bit. So or people who are not working on the project. So when you configure Specter, you have to whitelist. What do you have to whitelist? You have to whitelist Specter with the remote Specter with the bridge. So the bridge allows the connection from there. So the way you do that is you copy this URL here. It tells you already what the URL is, and then you have to paste it down here in this input field, basically. So which is like if you look at this interface, typically it's like, well, okay, you want me to copy something, then you want me to paste it like just a little bit lower. Like, why do I need to do that? Like, why? Like, this seems like a weird task for me. Why can't you just put it there? And the reason is that this form here at the bottom, this HWI bridge settings, that's actually loaded. That's a separate interface being loaded in. But because it blends so well as user, you just can't tell. But it is actually like a separate browser window that's embedded. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if it was visually different or so, you might be able to tell. But because it blends so well, I mean, that's typically a good thing when things blend really well. But in this case, it adds a little bit of confusion. So my approach was, or what I came up with in the end was to basically just to not embed it, to avoid that confusion altogether, but instead give people a clear step-by-step process. So, access the device bridge settings, click here, it opens a new window, then copy this thing in, and then save the changes, close the window, and then test the connections. You press test, and then it tells you if it works or not. Yeah, you can probably argue a few different ways here. What's easier? If embedding is easier and you get a little bit more confusion, but you clarify it, or do you keep it separate? Yeah, you probably tackle that a few different ways.
And all of this is kind of a work in progress as we try to process it in our minds and try to also get feedback from people. So I'm sure that with time we may come up with a solution that kind of merges both ideas in a better way. And I think that is kind of the hope here, that the solutions will get better.
Okay.
I think that was kind of it. That's what I had for this half of the challenge. Alexa, did you have any other thoughts?
Let me see. No, I think I'm good. Yeah.
Cool. So Specter team, what'd you make of that?
That's some really good feedback, I guess. Ben, what do you think about the embedded window at the end?
Yeah, I think you're right that here it's very confusing why the user needs to copy something from slightly up in the screen over there. So yeah, separating it is probably a much better idea. And yeah, I think in general the feedback is really helpful, and solutions will be much easier.
Yes, I agree. So, and I also like the idea at the beginning. Also, we would then have the term Specter server. That one at the beginning with the to-do list. I think that's also a good one. I'm not sure, Moritz. What do you think about Specter server?
I think it's a good, like for us, like I was laughing at the beginning when he was explaining us how complicated the whole setup basically is, because even for me it is kind of straightforward and easy with Spectre. It's Spectre, and then I listened to Peter McCormick yesterday, and it's like your brain melts because he's getting everything upside down. But when I see it from Christoph and Alexa, just tell me, it's like, okay, it's quite tricky. So I think the server idea is great, and the embedded video, the embedded window, I'm sorry, is a good point. And yeah, so overall, also what Alexa pointed out, that with the wording sometimes we could do some better stuff. What do you see?
Can you actually detect, or what? So if let's say Spectre, the remote Spectre is loaded within the desktop wrapper, then you can probably just add a query parameter. It's like, hey, you're being loaded from the desktop app, and it can like adjust the information that it's showing. But if you access it from your browser, you probably can't do that, right?
So I thought I thought how I would implement that is the question whether you're listening on the remote device or not. Because if you're listening on the remote device, then it could potentially show you that you're acting on Spectre server, and you might like be a little bit confused, and that is because you have a security problem. So in that case, you could potentially make also a small, maybe an eye for an information or something like that, where you see, okay, if you don't think that you're running on a remote server, then you might have started Spectre a wrong way, and it's accessible from the outside, something like that. Yeah, and the query parameter might also be a good idea. Ben, what do you think?
That the what? Sorry.
So the query parameter.
Yeah, I think that could work. We maybe there is a better way where we can either save it in the preference. No, we can't in the preference. Maybe we can inject it via JavaScript, but I need to check that.
Or maybe a HTTP header might do this as well. But I'm not sure. So, but the kind of way how you started, that would, from my point of view, also maybe solve a kind of security issue which people might have. Yeah, if they are confused that they are starting now a Spectre server, that they should be confused, and maybe someone is then just get informed and say something like, "Well, you're running it on the desktop and you're open to the on the local network."
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know we have these Figma designs now, and we can easily turn them into a prototype and ask some people to click through them and give more feedback. So that's really easy to do now. Before implementing anything, it's pretty easy now to test.
Okay.
So how would such kind of testing work? Is it? I'm not so familiar because it feels a little bit like a laboratory situation where people can't use the real thing, and how could they be possible give a reasonable feedback? Does it make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's there's obviously not, you cannot give all feedback. You cannot have somebody create a wallet and make a transaction, so that doesn't work. But you can guide people through the initial basic steps. And one common thing to do is you ask them to speak out loud, and you ask them to kind of talk about what they're thinking and how they respond to the experience. So they have a certain tasks that they need to go through, and maybe this is just start Specter, set it up to use a remote, and use these settings, and up to the point where you get the signal that the connection is successful or so. And then you ask them to go, and it could be just 3 or 4 or 5 screens, and then you just ask them if the terms make sense, if they know what to do next, if what they just did made sense to them, if they have clear ideas of what they should be doing. You observe if if their cursor kind of moves around the screen a lot. It's like they're looking around. That's a sign usually that the instructions are not very clear. There are all kinds of things you can look out for. But yeah, of course, it doesn't go all the way. But for things like terminology or basic screen navigation, it is you can do that pretty well with Figma, I think. What do you think, Alexa?
Yeah, I think Figma is a good place to get some feedback as far as how people could use some of these things without needing to go directly into something more that requires more work. And I think from our experience here, there people do tend to comment on what they feel it's kind of strange or unusual, or what gives them issues, even if they don't have the entire process or they're not running the entire application. And that way the feedback can help a little bit before you make any changes, and it saves some work, I think.
I think one thing that I'd be really interested in is getting feedback on is terminology. Just labeling things. So for example, this is the original design. You can kind of see it says HWI bridge settings, Specter desktop, and it says HWI bridge in this tab here at the top, and then it says HWI bridge URL, and it says whitelist. So it uses all kinds of terms that are not really explained. So I'm curious if you can ask people, like in the original design, like, hey, look at this page. What do you understand what each of those things are? What do you think they do? And then you change it, you change the copy around, and then you ask the same question, and you see what the response is. So that's a very simple thing to test.
And also, it's a good way to compare, because you see kind of the original and a new possible version, and you just by seeing it, you think, oh yeah, this kind of makes it simpler instead of having to read so much or having to have so many headlines or headings, I should say, headings, and just to try and simplify it as much as we can without losing some of the essentials that you need there.
On the topic of labels and stuff, I have some stuff that I was doing just to understand the like all the preferences that are available. Is it okay if I share my screen?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't put in as much time as Christoph and Alexa for sure. But I have this. Yeah, so I started going through the config files and the app settings to try to see like yeah, what are the different types of properties and the data types that they use. So for example, here we have this mode, which is Specter D. It's an enum, HWI bridge, and whatnot. So I'm doing this just to get like a understanding of the of all the configs and preferences. And something which I could do after that is perhaps add some annotations with like the labels, because some of these things.
May I interrupt, because I'm a little bit confused what that is. Is it kind of a representation from Figma which got created?
Yeah. Sorry, this is TypeScript.
And it's somehow created by Figma.
No. It has nothing to do with Figma. I was just looking. I don't typically start in Figma, unfortunately, so it's not as visual. I should have prefaced that a little bit. Yeah. So to understand like the information architecture, I started off by looking at the configuration files of Specter. To see what's being saved there, because I thought it was the most accurate representation, because I think there might be some things that aren't really shown in the UI that are still like stored in the preferences. So I just wanted to understand of like everything that's happening on the lower level.
Okay.
Yeah, and so these are the types here for the app settings. We have mode, Specter URL Tor, etc. And those for the config. And I was suggesting if this is something useful for the designers, maybe not in this format, because it's possible to turn this TypeScript into JSON schema. And then we have like these forms here. So these are the forms from the form fields from the config file with like modes, HWI, etc. And then we have the fields from the app those are from the app settings, and this one is the config file. So yeah, I don't know if this is something that's going to be useful. If it's like visualized in this way, like all laid out, maybe in a table, could be the next step for you guys, where we could then like add the labels that you want to test.
Yeah, no idea. I look very narrowly at the things that specifically to this one issue. And actually, there's a second issue we also need to talk about, the backup.
Okay, yeah, maybe this also bridges on that one a little bit as well. How to migrate between different computers.
This one seems to me like it's more app wide. So like a designer wants to know what is available in terms of all of the inputs and all of the labels and the properties of those inputs and labels, right? Just like a high level overview, like, okay, so this input field takes a number, this input field takes a string, this is a XYZ, and trying to design based off that, are you trying to say, right?
Just to deconstruct all the because there's a lot going on, and it was getting a bit disorienting going through all the preference screens.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it separately. We have about 15 or 20 minutes left. I'd like to still get to the second issue about backup, and then get some feedback or figure out what we want to do with all of this stuff. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we have to speed up a little bit with the second thing. Alexa, did you get a chance to look at the backup and export?
I have not yet looked at it, though I've thought about it. Some of the things that could be done, but go ahead, explain what you have, and I'll add some thoughts in the end.
Okay. So the second problem was related to backing up and exporting, and they're really, from a user perspective, there are kind of three different tasks that are going on. Either you want to back up your whole Specter. So let's say your computer dies, you need to recover it and install it on another, get it going on another computer. You can just import that backup, or you can work on a wallet level. And there are two things you can do with a wallet. You want to back it up. That means you want to store that wallet configuration for some future use in case you lose your desktop or something, like, for security. Or the other thing is it's an export. You can, take a similar set of data, but you want to put that one wallet and you want to set it up on your phone or on another computer. So it's like you want to transfer that wallet data to somewhere else. So that's the export. And it sounds like there are multiple things going on. There's on the one hand, and that's a question for the Specter team. On the one hand, there's the user side, like how does a user figure work through all of this stuff with like 100 different wallet formats? But the other side, and I was curious about that, there's a certain developer complexity, because as a development team, you have to organize all of this stuff, right? So if a user creates a certain types of wallet and they want to export it to Electrum or Blue Wallet or somewhere else, there are certain formats that you need to support. So and it wasn't quite clear to me from the description, is it also kind of a developer problem, or are you primarily talking about a user-facing problem?
I think it's mostly a user-facing problem.
Yeah.
By now, we already have most of the formats. So yeah, it's a pain for the developer, but also for the users.
Yeah.
Now,
So you have it control. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, adding a question there. Where you have the general settings, well, one of the suggestions would be that you should call it backup and maybe figure out where to put. I know there's two things in that general settings is the backup, and some of it has to do with more of the currency display. And I'm thinking that it's important to know that you have a backup setting. And also a little bit on the wording as far as export goes, for me, was a bit strange. So I wasn't as familiar with it in terms of instead of something like backup or migrate or something like that. But getting to my question here, when you have the backup, I know there's two different backups that you run. One when you add a device, and then another one when you go into the settings and get all of the backup that you have. Is there a way to separate some of those so you can know, like if you added a specific wallet, it can tell you, hey, you already have this backup, or download it again. And I know that some of the issues were that you had this question of whether if you had some kind of a change already in the system, if you could, you'd need to run the backup again. So is there any way to, like, in the general settings, which I would recommend to be more of a backup, to have it separate, but also when there's a change to let people know that they need to run their backup again?
So you mean basically that whenever there is somebody updates labels or adds the wallet or something, so that they know that they need to back up? So you're asking whether this is possible?
Yes.
Yes, yeah, I think so.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Mhm.
That would be useful, I think, if there was some kind of a list of devices that you have, and then it would notify or let you know that there's something there. And actually, one of the ways that you could let people know is maybe have a little, in the settings tab, have a little notification circle, like, or an extra notification bell somewhere up there. But I'm thinking maybe just and I don't know if you know what I mean, but when you get the little notifications and there's something up there that you need to look into, maybe that's a way to let people know that they need to do something there in the settings.
Just trying to visualize it here, Alexa. So one of the things that I looked at was exactly what you said, create a separate tab called backup. And then let's see, the labeling here was backup and restore, Specter data backup. There was some minor feedback that I had here, which where is it? Yeah, for example, it says download Specter files, but when you want to import it, it says choose backup folder. Like, is it files or is it folder now? So just some minor stuff. So I changed it to say, backup, and I either create a backup or I import a backup. So was more clear to me. And then when it says create backup, it tells me like download a copy of the following Specter data, 3 devices, 1 wallet, and settings. So I understand right away, okay, this is what I'm going to back up. And then Alex, I just added this here as you were speaking, last backup 2 weeks ago. And then it says there were 10 changes made since your last backup. That's
nice.
what you mentioned, right? And then import backup was pretty much the same thing. Also clarified a little bit, like import devices, wallets, and settings. And then I tested this, and I feel like when I chose my backup folder and I imported it, it didn't give me any feedback. I couldn't tell if anything happened. So I just came up with this screen here, which says, okay, this is what we found. What do you want to import? And it says, okay, there are these 2 wallets. There are these 3 devices. At the top device, it says a wallet with this name already exists and will be overwritten. And then it also tells me, okay, here are the application settings, and then here are the labels that will be imported, and I can just pick which one I want before it actually gets imported. And then, it's more clear to me what's going to happen, because it's kind of scary. And one of the things that wasn't clear to me in the original wording was restore sounded to me like, okay, it's going to delete everything I have and only use the data in the backup. But in one of the tooltips, it said that existing wallets with the same name will be overwritten. So it wasn't clear to me if this is an import and override or a restore. And there were 2 different things. So I tried to clarify that in the copy also. But you can kind of avoid that basically. Well, if you just call it import, then it's clear, like it's not a replace or a restore, it's an import. I'm pulling in more data. I'm not, deleting everything. I'm not doing a reset first. And then if you have this preview, then people will know before they commit, they can review it. And I'm sure details here are missing, or wrong, but that's kind of that would address.
And there's some interrelations between also, because if you choose, okay, I don't want to import the device Trezzy, I cannot import the wallet long-term savings.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's a good point.
And then there might be another step. If something goes wrong, if it works out, maybe you need to do something else. I don't know, maybe there are duplicate labels, or there might be other cleanup work that has to be done after the typical import. Not sure, but there might be something else. Because the last thing you want is, people import something and then everything kind of looks messy, or things look broken, or duplicated or so.
This is a very good point, yeah. Because I think I remember, Ben, that we talked about the import and the imports and download thing, and I tried to give you feedback, but I was terribly failing there. Okay.
So that was Alexa. Did you have anything else on the Specter-wide export?
As far as a visual, I know I don't have something to show you guys, but I'm thinking that when you arrive to the backup settings, it would be nice if you had a little bit of a round button of sorts that would turn red when you needed to run your backup. And maybe have an extra message there that said, you have some new information, or you haven't run, you're not up to date on your backup, so you can run it again. And that way you kind of, when you first arrive there, you know that there's something wrong there because it's red and you need to update it.
I mean, that's the question is then how do you figure that out, and can you come up with a standard that works for the majority of users? Or do you have maybe 3 different options, like something simple, okay, remind me weekly, remind me monthly, or every 6 months or so, or what?
No, I'm kind of running off of Ben's answer, saying that they could have a list of different wallets, and the ones that you've already backed up, it kind of says that, there's some kind of indication that it's green and you have backed it up. But that if there's a change, the system will recognize that and be able to run that, to save that. That is one option. Another option would be to say something like every few months or, within a certain span of time, it would decrease. You'd need to run the backup again. And I have no idea what that would be like on the development side, but there's two options. One of them when there's a change, or one of them or based on time.
There was one more question that I had here about this piece of copy. There are a few times where it says it is recommended. I was just wondering why. But the other copy here was, backups are recommended to ensure that access to funds remain. So as kind of a new novice, not thinking too hard user, I'm thinking, well, does that mean that my private keys and everything is included in that backup?
No, the private keys are not part of the backup.
But because if it says here that backups are recommended to ensure that access to funds remain, if this backups ensures that access to funds remains, it has to allow for signing logically, right? Because otherwise, right?
Yeah, it sometimes it might contain details which are needed for signing, which are not the private keys, so the paths for signing.
Yeah, correct. So it's for the kind of transaction creation. Yeah, but I think that there's some nuance in there that might be good to clarify. Yeah, text is hard.
That might be a good one. Just one of them allows you to have access to your funds, and the other one kind of to let you know where they are. I don't know how to differentiate that, but yes.
So we have. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
We have. How are you doing on time? We have about 5 minutes still scheduled. I can go over here. There's a whole other section for the wallet backup.
I have to run to another call at 7. But
Okay.
this is really great. I love it.
Awesome. So we can. I mean, the rest of us can continue to if you want to. But while you're still here, I was wondering, what do we do after this? Like, what's next? There are all kinds of ideas here, and of course, you probably want to take a look at it. And some of them you'll say, well, that's nonsense. Other things you will say, oh, maybe there's something there. And then, whatever happens might be somewhere in the middle. And then it might be helpful to hear from you, what you would like to do next and what you would like to move forward with and whatnot, and in what areas also might need more discussion and more revisions.
So I see quite a few points here which are really good. Kim and Ben, how would you roll here?
So I think I have a preference on, because I always think in priorities, right? And then number one priority is the most important one, and then let's focus on that one. And I think if I compare the device stuff with the backup stuff, then on the one hand side, it's probably easier to work on the backup than on the device. And also it might be more important for the user in order to not lose any data and to clarify it there. So, yeah, Ben, what do you think?
I think actually starting with the HWI bridge thing might be better because we have a lot more users that get stuck with that.
Okay.
So
yeah.
I think it's more urgent for more users.
Yes. There's also the weighing off of effort. Changing some text really easy. If there's some more underlying changes, way harder. Right?
I was gonna just chime in quickly. Might be worth Ben and Kim. Sorry. It doesn't seem like you're that familiar with Figma as well. So go into the Figma files and play around and leave some comments in there as well. Might be a nice way to get more familiar with Figma as well.
That's true. Do you know how to leave comments in Figma?
I didn't know you can leave comments in Figma.
Yeah, but for anybody that doesn't know, that doesn't know, on the top here, I'll share my screen. On the top, here, I don't know if you can see my cursor. There's a bubble, and then you can point out to anything, and then you can leave a comment.
Okay.
So it's really, really easy, and then we'll see them and we can reply, and it's up here always. And if you also want a copy of this file, then you can go up here, you can duplicate, and you'll have it on your own, and you can play with it, like modify things and stuff. And if you see, I was kind of thinking of what could possibly be the list of things if you have a hardware wallet, and something to indicate that you need to update it. That's just a quick thing. But yeah, feel free to comment on any of the on any of the documents and to improve on this and see what works best.
Yeah, we'll get emails, I think. No, this would be your file, so you'll get all the emails.
Sorry.
No, go nuts. Go wild with the comments.
Oh, and one other thing I forgot to mention. If you look at my screen here, there's several pages. So if you go to preferences, there's files, and then settings, it's a different thing, and then backup. Well, I'm just turning on the backups. It's the same thing with Christoph's. He has several pages here. That's just, yeah. So you can look at all of them.
So how do you switch between Christoph and Alexa?
So they're different. They're actually different Figma files.
Yeah.
And the Figma files are chosen.
Maybe one of them can post them in the design review channel after. But they're just separate separate files that I think are accessible publicly. So I'm not even sure if you need.
Okay.
No, you just need the URL.
Yeah, you just need the URL.
Yeah, they're in the chat here.
Nice. Ready to party.
I don't know if it would be helpful, but I like the idea. I can't remember if it was Christoph or Alexa, but sort of like research reviews or something, like either recording or going through with people just how they would use for the first time, like kind of their flows and questions they would have, specific things you're looking for. I don't know if that's a good next step. Maybe some of us, I'd certainly be happy to like run through it and just you guys could ask questions or see where pain points are, if that's helpful.
Guys, I'm out. Thank you very much. Cool. Brilliant stuff. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Bye.
No, that's a good suggestion, Patricia. I think Christoph mentioned that a little bit earlier with the prototypes as well. And obviously in Figma, it's really easy to throw a prototype together. So whenever that's ready, I guess one of you can reach out to Patricia and she can help with some of the testing.
And Ben, you have a pretty active Telegram group. Right? You think the people in there would be some people that would be just available where if you send them a prototype or say, hey, can we hop on a video call? I can ask you some questions.
Yeah, I think we could probably find someone who will be willing to help with that.
Awesome. Yeah, and those are actual users. You gotta especially ask the people that got confused with exactly these things and see if that would have helped them. If you also you spend a lot of your time working on Specter?
Sorry?
You spend a lot of your time working just on Specter, right?
Yes, quite some time.
And are you available during the day for video calls or so?
Usually, yes, yeah.
Okay, cool. Because we could hop on a call to talk through some of these details too, and prioritize things, or because it's like one thing to move things around in Figma, but implementation is a different thing, and it needs to be prioritized, and you have limited resources and all of this stuff. So it might be good to just figure out how exactly to go about things. I mean, you can also do that as a team if you want to, but I'm always happy to chat about this also.
Yeah, sure. I'm usually available.
Cool.
Alright, I'm gonna stop recording as well.